My name is Timothy Nevaquaya, and I'm here to talk about Native American flute music and maybe a little bit of history about it. I'd like to start you out with a song. Yeah. Most of the songs that I play today have no titles. I think that sometimes, whenever you title a song, everybody wants to hear you replicate it. To me, music has been a spiritual experience in my lifetime, and I didn't want to be captivated by, just repeating something. I wanted to be able to express how I felt at that time. I think eventually I'll have a concert called Songs with No Names, because it's a spirit. Music is a spirit. We have these instruments, and, nobody really knows when they truly evolved among the Native American people. Nobody doesn't even know the tribe that it originated out of. There was a story. When I first heard the story, I thought it was from the Comanche people, because that's what I am. I'm a Comanche Indian. I'm Comanche, Choctaw, and Chickasaw. And but later on, I began to hear other tribes and their stories. And it was a different variation, but it was the same story. So I began to realize, as I got older, that this story came from one man, but it spread among the prairie people. Anyway, nobody doesn't even know the name of this individual, but certainly that story. It was a young man who had lost his family through a mysterious sickness. He was grief-stricken, and he wandered off from his people because, he was, the wound in his heart never could heal. So he started to explore, and in the evening times, the native people, whenever they mourned, they wailed, and it was almost like a mild holler, just to relieve the pain that they were feeling. So people would hear that in the evening time. And then one night, this gentleman, he wandered off and he went to sleep under a cedar tree. And during that time he was asleep, he began to have a dream. And in that dream, he encountered a spirit. And during that time, he heard this strange music, and it was actually beautiful, and it gave him great peace and comfort. And then the spirit began to talk to him and told him that in his vision, he saw this image of a flute, and he said, this image will bring you great peace, and it will help to heal others, and that he instructed him on how to make it. So this conversation went on. And then before he knew it, he woke up. He laid under this tree and he wondered about what he had heard. And then the wind began to blow, and then he heard this humming sound. And he began to realize, hey, it sounds like what I'd heard in my dream. So he began to follow this sound, and he crawled up the tree, and there was a branch that had been hollowed out by the woodpeckers. And anyway, when the wind blew, it made this humming sound. And he began to realize, this is what I saw. So he took that branch and he split it in half and cleaned the insides of it out. And he started to remember the instructions that he had. So he had to develop his own tools to work on this instrument. And then finally, he created the first instrument, the first flute that we call the flute. He began to learn how to play, and he started to almost immediately create music. So in the evening times, whenever the people heard this gentleman, they heard no more wailing, but they started to hear this strange music. So anyway, some of the warriors followed that sound, and when they found it, it was him. And then he began to tell them about what had happened and how he had become whole during that time of playing this instrument. So in this story, from what I'd learned, was that the instrument was really a source of healing. The music that it produced, actually had a healing quality and comforted us, So even today, when I play it, I still hear the quality of the sound. I hear it, and it takes me on a journey. So anyway, I'd like to share some of that with you. This is one of my favorite instruments, and it has a very mellow tone to it. So if you want, you can close your eyes and let's take a little journey together. That right there is, the music that, I grew up with. I began to hear the word, well, this is traditional flute music. And at that time, it was traditional, and the way my dad, he introduced me to the instrument. And I didn't realize at that time that the instrument, the flute, was becoming a dying art. There were very few people that were playing it, although there was that going on, yet a lot of the older people retained a lot of the knowledge. We had remnants of stories from our past, and it was about the flute. So my dad, he learned that, and he passed it down to me and my brothers. So, that's what I'm sharing with you today. But during that time, my dad was playing, but there were a lot of other gentlemen that we probably will never know them. But they were playing the instrument, and but they never got the public acclaim that my dad did. And for some reason, that light shined on my dad, and he was very fortunate. And anyway, he basically reintroduced, the modern people of today to the instrument. And he began to play it and make it. And then he encountered another gentleman by the name of Dr. Richard Payne. And anyway, they collaborated over the years, and Dr. Payne was doing historical research, but he was a medical doctor by trade. But anyway, him and Dad became friends, and anyway, my dad shared a lot of his knowledge with him. When we go back to the story, the medicine men began to see that this was a new form of medicine. So they began to incorporate the instrument into their private, personal ceremonies. So among the Comanche, some of the medicine men knew how to call on the little people. And I believe that has become a lost art today. I don't think that anybody uses the instrument for that. But in that day and time, they would use it in a healing ceremony. If somebody was sick, well, the medicine man, instead of singing the old sacred songs, well, he incorporated the instrument into his ceremonies, and he would begin to play. And then one of the little people, which the Comanche called them the Nunapi, which meant little man, and he would appear, and then he would assist the medicine man in the healing of this person. Because since he was a spirit, well, he could see into this person. And then he could tell the medicine man what was wrong, and then they would fix that problem. And then when the ceremony was over with, well, the medicine man would make a replica of his instrument, and then the spirit would leave, and then the next morning, the medicine man would go out into the creeks, wherever they were camped at, and then he would dig a hole in the ground, and he would bury the instrument. And that would be the gift to the spirit that helped it. But today, we were always instructed not to play the instrument at night, because sometimes you call on these people. These instruments all have spiritual implications. When I was growing up, and when I was learning how to play, well, Dad would always tell me, make sure that you have listeners. That way, the spirit will know that you weren't calling on him. That's what me and my brothers would do. We would always play wherever there was a crowd or before the sun went down, because we also, according to the tradition, would never play it at night, because that's when those spirits would come, unless you had someone that was listening. But then as time went on, young men began to use it as an instrument of courtship, and they would incorporate it into those ceremonies. If there was somebody that they were interested in, well, then they would develop their own love songs. And then, well, they would play wherever this person could hear them, and they would be drawn to that music, and it resulted in a family, and that's how the flute got its name, courting flute. So then, as time gone on, well, then they used to create flutes of courtship, so it was designated for that. But then, whenever the warrior had achieved what he was after, then he was advised not to play it anymore, because you may call someone else and it would cause problems. So he would have to play it privately. So, there were things like that that are actually becoming forgotten today in today's society. The Native American flute has really taken on a new evolution. Today, the non-natives have really taken to it because whenever they heard the music, it had that same profound effect on them. And they began to become interested, and they began to make it. And, and then somebody had the idea of recording the sound and then telling us what key it was in, which has really been a strange concept for me, because I learned the traditional way. But yet today, you get them in the key of F sharp, D flat, but I've never deviated from the traditional type of tuning. I think that I wanted to preserve that one part of history that I had learned, because although we deviate from the traditions, I think that it's very important that a certain element remain, because I believe that the instrument was given to us through a flute, the flute, and I think that we should continue to maintain that so that it never loses that power that it possessed. But also, it was inevitable that today the sound of the instruments have become perfected. At one time, I thought, oh, we're losing the tradition. But, after making this for over 40 years now, you begin to learn some things along that way. That tradition is basically repeating something over and over. And if you deviate from it, it's considered sacrilegious. But I realize, that this is subject to change. I remember getting a call, and they wanted me to use one of my songs with the Oklahoma City Philharmonic. So they recorded one of those traditional sounding flutes. A friend of mine by the name of Patrick Conlon, he got the recording and he translated it into sheet music. And then he gave it over to the Oklahoma City Philharmonic, and they created a song using the violins and the cellos and all of the classical instruments. So when I heard my flute song played like that, it was absolutely beautiful, the way it was composed, but it was also very intimidating, because for me, whenever I played this certain song, there were so many different variations on it. But then whenever the Philharmonic had it, well, they played it very specific. So I had to relearn the song that I created in order to accommodate them. But the marvelous thing was Alexander Micklewaiting, the conductor, well, he gave me a segment in the song where I could freelance. So while the orchestra was playing, well, then I could deviate from the song and then re-enter. And the beautiful thing about it was the instruments harmonized with the flute. So, many other artists have experimented with the sound of the flute. We've incorporated into bands. I've experimented with Spanish guitar music and created some songs. So the instrument really is in a great state of evolution. 50 years from now, there's no telling what it's going to sound like. Today, flutists have combined two flutes together, and they call it a drone, which is a new term, something I've never heard of until, about 20 years ago, and I began to see that, well, I viewed it as being sacrilegious, but today I begin to realize, well, that's just it's human nature. We're subject to change. Every day is a new day. Yesterday is as old as 1,000,000 years, and it's never coming back. And we're constantly changing. Traditions change. So, I don't feel bad, whenever I do something new. And it's like that in Native American art. We had traditional Indian art, which was based upon the ledger drawings of the warriors that were captured at the Fort Marion. It was basically, out of boredom, whenever they were captured. They were given, sheets of paper and Crayolas, and they began to record their life that actually was destroyed before their eyes, and their memories. And then as time went on, and we began to assimilate, and then we began to get better equipment, well, then the traditions and art began to change to basically what it is today. And, and I've seen so many things in my lifetime get incorporated to the art, to the flutes, to the music, and I begin to realize that, we're always in a state of change. at one point, I felt sad about it, but then again, I thought if I didn't change, I would have been involved in something that, I would have been depressed with, because you can't grow in traditions. You can't. You can grow to learn it, love it, but yet you have your own personal growth. And that's how it is with the flute music and with the art. I'd learned to be a traditional Indian artist through my dad, through his teachings, through observation of other artists. But then, and I began to repeat them. But I realized, there were things that I wanted to do, but tradition wouldn't allow that. So when I started to break away from it, that's when the revolution began to happen in my life. It changed in my music, changed in my art, and, it changed me. And, now today, I'm able to tell others that it's okay, be free, let yourself explore, because there's no telling what you're going to unlock. And it's beautiful on the other side. It's powerful. As a matter of fact, whatever you create or whatever you do has the capability of healing others, bringing others peace, helping people out, through, your creations. It's the spirit of art. It's a spirit that comes inside of us. It's a spirit that evolves. It's a spirit that changes all the time. And that's why, if you've ever observed my art, that's why it changes. I remember others were saying, don't get involved in too many styles. But, when you're creating, that's almost impossible now. Even in my music, whenever I incorporate it with the Spanish guitar, it's a beautiful concoction. And it harmonizes, and it takes you to another dimension. This is the instrument that I actually used with the Oklahoma City Philharmonic. And anyway, this instrument was gifted to me from Joy Harjo. We were at one of her events, and one day she said, I want to give this to you. And anyway, we got to perform together at the Gilcrease Museum. And anyway, that was the first time that while I was playing the instrument, Joy joined in with me, and she began to harmonize her voice with the instrument. And we had a group of nuns that were visiting, and they began to surround us, and they started to dance to the music. And I began to realize that they were caught up in the spirit of that moment. It was like supernatural. And we weren't trying to achieve anything like that. We were just there to create music in honor of the late Alan Hauser. But this happened. So in my lifetime, there were supernatural things that I got to witness with my dad. There was a time in Oklahoma City, he played the Comanche rain song, and it was just a song that he titled that. And because he had heard of stories where the Comanche medicine men would play the instrument and they would actually cause it to rain. So he had this song, and when he played it at the Gene Kirkpatrick Center in Oklahoma City, and this happened in 1976, and he told the people what it was, and he gave them the stories. And then when he began to play, we were in the building, and there was a low-level thunder kind of vibrated the walls. And so I said, do you think it's really raining outside? Anyway, we had a few people that were curious, and they went out, and a big thunderstorm came over. It was a thunder hit, and it started to rain and lightning. And after that, everybody went outside, and it was really amazing. And I think I was about 10 years old when this happened. But I remember people standing outside in the rain, and they were like, this really happened. Dad never claimed that he could do anything like that. It was just a song to him. So he did another lecture in Washington, D.C., and one of the journalists picked that story up. And he put it in the paper that there was going to be a Comanche Indian from Apache, Oklahoma, it was going to make it rain in Washington. Dad, thought, this is crazy because, that was just coincidence. So during this lecture, he played the song, and then after that, a big thunderstorm come over Washington, D.C., and it rained. But even after that, and then there were other times that wasn't recorded, it still rained. Through his lifetime, he never claimed that he could do anything like that. But I always believed that, it was a gift, that the Lord gave to him. And it was with him for the rest of his life until the day he passed away. For me, I don't claim anything like that, but I'm fortunate to know what I know. And I'm thankful that I'm able to share it with everybody, and let you know a part of Native American history. It's one of the great facets that came out of the Plains, the Southeastern tribes, and the Southwestern tribes. They all have their stories, and anyway, this is ours. And anyway, I'd like to share some more music with you. Thank you. And anyway, I have an instrument here, and this is from Rosebud, South Dakota, and it was gifted to me from my nephew. One of their instruments, which is a traditional one, and it has 5 note holes. And that's really one of the things about the northern style flutes, is they had 5 note holes, but the southern plains had 6 note holes. But then, there are other instruments from different tribes that some contain 3 and 4 note holes. The flutes were very individualistic. There was a certain way that they were made, but yet, people personalized them. I think that the traditional measurements, they use the width of their hands and the width of their thumbs for measurements. And in some cases, some tribal members use the length of their arms. When we talk about modern flutes, today, the tools and the measurements are more precise, more precision versus what was going on in the past. I think that in the past, like I was saying, they had to make their tools specifically for this. So, they would use a flint stone. They would use a sandstone to sand the instruments down, and then they would use an elk bone knife to carve out the interior of the instrument. And then, at that time, since the instrument was made out of cedar, it was more of a softwood. So at that time, it was very unusual to use anything different from the cedar wood. But today, we use different woods, exotic woods, which are very hard woods. And then, with that, the sound starts to change. This is what you would probably hear among the Lakota people. Now, today, I have a river cane flute here, and this is made by a gentleman by the name of Presley Byington, and he's a Choctaw Indian. His version of the instrument, which actually has a very traditional sound, and what I mean by traditional sound, it's more not as high pitched as some of those that have been tuned into, the been inspired by European techniques. And anyway, I can actually play some of the Comanche music through this instrument. And then this is an instrument that I made out of a river cane probably about 13 years ago, and it's been with me. And as a matter of fact, I gave it to my son, so he plays it. When you play this one with the Spanish guitar, you have a different type of music. So anyway, Well, this here is a fetish, and and it varied. I think some would make it according to the clan that they come from. If it was a bird clan, some would use maybe a horse head if they were part of the horse culture. So it's been in a state of evolution itself. It's begun to change. Some who in modern times, they made something that was I think more abstract. So it evolved, and for me, this is more of a replica of a bird. Didn't have anything specific in mind, but it was more symbolic of the animals that fly. Underneath this fetish, it's carved out, just enough for ear to travel from this wind hole to this wind hole, and then it hits this area just right, and that's how the sound is produced. And then these actually are tone holes. And whenever you carve these out, however wide you make them, it changes the tone of the instrument. So that's how you really tune them in. But in the past, before, the flutes were really tuned in, they would pretty much just take their chances. So in the past, since we didn't have ways of tuning them, they would take the characteristics of that sound, and then they would create their music. So that's probably what made it more unique than today's finely tuned instruments. I think that's how that traditional sound evolved. What I come to know as traditional sound. But yeah, today, this one, it has a deeper bass tone. And this one here has more of a high-pitched, a shrill type of sound. And then I've also experimented with instruments from other countries, especially the South American instruments. And, there were the panpipes, and then we had a bone of a llama from Bolivia that I used to play. And then also we used to have a Hawaiian flute, which was made out of a sugar cane. But when you played that instrument, you couldn't blow into it. You had to blow through your nose because it was a bad omen to play with your mouth. So I was the only one that dared to play that. And it was actually in my dad's collection. And anyway, we had instruments from Ecuador and Peru, and then of course we had the Hawaiian instruments. So I was learning these instruments, and then we had a few Japanese instruments that I used to play when I was growing up. So being raised up with a dad, I didn't realize that the things that we were doing in the past were actually being reintroduced into society. And I didn't realize I was a part of that. I had no idea. To me, he was just dad, and he played these instruments, and I got to listen to him, and then, I started playing them. But there was a gentleman here who was telling me, he was around the instrument, but he never learned how to play. So anyway, I wanted to talk about that, and then we'll end it here. One day, my dad was painting, and I was playing his instrument, and I was really making some terrible noises with it, and I think I got on his nerves. So he took his glasses off, and he goes, "Timothy," he said, "come here." He goes, "I want to show you." He said, "I'm going to show it to you one time," and he goes, "You need to learn this." He goes, "'Cause I'm not going to show you again." So, all right. So we got the flute, and he said, "Put your fingers on all of the note holes." He said, "Make sure that they're closed off, no air escaping." He said, "Now blow into it." He goes, "But when you want to change the tone," he said, "lift this finger up and then go up." But he said, "Leave this one down." I opened them all up, and then when I closed them, he said, "Close it with this one and then go right back down." He said, and that's what my music is based upon, is that one move. So anyway, it just goes. So anybody can play it. That's all I did. And then I began to practice that every day. And then I started to manipulate the tone holes, and I started to create my own music. And that's how I started to evolve. And that's when the journey really started. So one more thing about this instrument. According to the tradition, only males were to play this instrument. And if a female tried to play it, it would cause a bad omen to come over the people. So when I was growing up, I would always tell people, well, you know, because they would always ask, well, are girls allowed to play? And I said, no, it was not meant for you. It was a male instrument. But today, society has certainly changed. And I believe that we broke a lot of the spiritual laws. And sometimes I believe that's why we're in the mess we're in. Something that could bless everybody, sometimes it gets abused. And I thank you guys very much for coming. And hopefully we'll all meet again. Thank you. And also, I would like to thank the great Cherokee Nation for inviting me. I certainly appreciate them. I really want to thank them, you know, for allowing me to share this information. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Cherokee Nation. I appreciate you.